Look at where we are. Bookless Classroom. We are outside in Michigan on a beautiful, beautiful day. You're going to hear some workers in the background, which doesn't bother me. I hope it doesn't bother you. I think it's a great sound to hear some men working this early in the morning. And in fact, let's take a peek, shall we, while I go get my coffee. They didn't seem to mind. And why would they? They're working hard. Están trabajan muy, I don't know. ¿Cómo se dice? Difícil. Difícil. Sit in your basket. Good girl. I'm not going to worry about the shots that you guys get in there. I'm going to trust that you're not going to be a voyeur about it. Sometimes a woman's got to walk around and do what a woman's got to do. Take it easy. Thanks for letting me get my coffee, though. And we are here in the Bookless Classroom. I am so happy because I prepared till after 3 o'clock this morning, and it was all on this. I swear to gosh, it really was. But I wouldn't have done it if I didn't want to do it. I could have gone to bed at 2. I prepared, like, I think a month's worth of PowerPoints for us. Almost. Just about. But especially because I have a whole bunch of stuff to do that aren't related to PowerPoints, like a whole bunch of stuff that isn't related to PowerPoints, like finishing this wonderful book, or at least this wonderful chapter on Abraham Lincoln from John Bowman, which I have had little criticisms about this book. I had one major criticism about Pierce. Why didn't you tell us about him losing his child, his 3rd child he lost in such a traumatic way? And this is really a major thought that I've had about individuals having to completely risk their lives. They really are risking their lives when they are governing. And I've got, oh my gosh, thank you to iCivics. Thanks to iCivics. I have to put that down, and I will put that down there. I cannot even begin to tell you how many wonderful pieces of material, from PowerPoints to pictures to reading material that I got on the Civil War. I was so happy with that. iCivics. you did a great job. If you're, associated with Apple, Macintosh, whatever, we know great products right there. But, iCivics. And it was all free to me. It was all free. Did have to sign my little name in, but okay, I get it. I want people to sign their name in when they come and visit me on my website, so I get it, right? Info is gold today, isn't it? We are reading about Abraham Lincoln here, and I'm looking around to see if I've missed anything on my video. I don't think I've missed anything because I got the little shot over here of the video already. So yeah, so now they're covering up those slats. Although, I'm wondering where the ductwork is. That's what I'm wondering. I mean, they got space for it. Lots of suspicious stuff going on, but they're working hard. Okay, so if you remember, we only started with page 1 on Abraham Lincoln. And like I said, I think I put together 2 full PowerPoints, maybe 3. And then like a half a dozen. You're like, get to it, Annette. So remember what we looked at here. The earliest photograph of Abraham Lincoln, right there. Look at that. That's a pretty good shot there too in the camera. It's not a bad shot, right? There we go. No, that was better. It's on an angle a little bit. There we go. There's our 16th president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. I have to look to see. See, because if I don't look, I can't see where the book is. There's our 16th president. Let me look again. Yeah, that's a pretty good shot. Let me move it up a little bit. And then, there we go. I think that's a pretty good shot, right? All right. I'll back it up a little bit, and then you can see it a little bit better, I think. And now, there's his log cabin below, the original log cabin in which Lincoln lived as a boy. That's crazy. I wonder if it's preserved someplace. Look it up. So this is where we were. This is where we left off on Thursday. Slowly, he began to be known in statewide political circles and eventually became a political power himself. He returned to active politics by running for the United States House of Representatives. Elected in 1846 as a Whig, he managed to make little headway over the next 2 years, and in 1849 he returned to private life in Springfield, somewhat disillusioned. I might have read this, I'm not sure. Then in 1854, something roused him again. That year, his Illinois political rival, Stephen A. Douglas, gained passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in the United States Senate. Lincoln began speaking out against the act, which allowed slavery into new territories if they so voted. Though Lincoln was personally convinced of slavery's evil, and to many his political views seemed radical, his actual position was still that of a moderate. Slavery should be deplored, but still temporarily protected in the South. By no means should it be allowed to extend into the territories. He was to maintain his position into the war, though his anti-slavery bias soon became obvious. Now, this is what I've been gathering is this. So it's like, okay, he was a moderate on slavery. Well, that is misleading, it seems. Because as we read his speeches, he seemed to abhor slavery. And that the only reason why he had a moderate position on the topic at all was because he could not completely alienate the South. We see what happened, right? South Carolina's like, out of here. Abraham Lincoln's the president? I don't think so. Very similar to what happened in our 2020 election, right? Oh, Joe Biden's the president? Out of here. But they didn't want to leave this wonderful dream of a country, right? So they said, country who believes in Joe Biden, leave us. Yeah, I don't think so. the rule of law. The rule of law is that the law applies to everybody. That's the rule of law. That was actually something that we talked about, but was another part of the lesson that I was looking at in civics, which I thought brought it home. Although I looked at so many other things, I didn't look at that rule of law as closely as many of the other things. Crazy, incredible links on that civics. Let me show you something, if I can, if you don't mind. And if you do, I actually can't hear you. I'm sorry. I wish I could if you minded. I mind all that Lucy hair all over this is what I mind. Okay. Let me show you something for just a second. I do know exactly where it is. So here is a page from the iCivics lessons that I've been using. I just want to quick show you and give you a reason to take a look at this, right? So, this is called Scope and Sequence. Scope and Sequence. I think I might even have, let me just do something here. All right, I don't know why I'm taking so long doing this. I do know why, but I don't need to, is what I'm saying. No reason to take that long just to show you this. I was going to give you a better picture or a better concept or whatever, but it's not to be. But this is what we do have. This is what I do have to show you. So this is where I got our links on, and part of my lesson for a background on democracy. I started putting together, I got on the sovereign state. I call it What is a State? My PowerPoint, What is a State? Right here. So this wonderful PowerPoint was taken entirely from that iCivics lesson there, number 2, up at the top here. Number 2 at the top here. The sovereign state, mine is called What is a State? That entire lesson that we're going to see was taken from iCivics. That right here, that number 2 right there. So when you go to, what did I call it again? I didn't call it that. Scope and what? Scope and sequence. Scope and sequence. So when I went to iCivics and I did scope and sequence, what it gave me was this one PDF. And in this one PDF, they have, I know, my signal is completely red. Thanks, Xfinity, for charging me $100 a month. So here I've got the links right here, or I have the links. Every one of those lessons there in bold is a link. So all of those are for the foundation of government. And my entire PowerPoint, I didn't, it was ugly. It was ugly. I'm sorry, iCivics. You can have my PowerPoint if you want, because I used your lesson. If you want to use my PowerPoint, you can. It's really nice. My PowerPoint is really nice. So you can learn about a state from my PowerPoint, but anyway, it's all from there. So anything that you want to advance on, this is an unbelievable website, and everything was free. I had to sign up. I don't agree with young children under 18 signing up for any website. I don't agree with that because they're stealing your data. So maybe have your parents sign up for it, right? Have your parents look at it and have your parents sign up for it. Thanks for letting me get my coffee. So that has been unbelievable. All right, let's move on. I do want to show our title, though. I really should show our title for today because I didn't show that. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Remember, I want to remind you that we've been talking also about the 3 branches of government. So I'm going to go back to our Lincoln book in just a second. Stay with me. Follow Bouncing Ball, please. So we've talked about the 3 branches of government. I'm not going to pull it up right now. I have too many. I want you to call it up. I want you to call it up in your memory, right? What are those 3 branches of government? There isn't a student that should be graduating high school that does not know our 3 branches of government. If you're graduating high school, you need to know our 3 branches of government. I was just thinking about somebody who was talking about squinting, and I could see my eyes squinting here, and I'm trying not to get them to squint so much. It's kind of hard sometimes when it gets bright, and when I have my glasses on and it's reflecting some of that light. So that was a little message somebody sent me. Thank you for sending me that message. Although I could still tell. I gotta do this. That doesn't help, does it? No. I know what might help. Some coffee. So, we should not be graduating high school without knowing our branches of government. So make sure you know them. There are 3 branches of government. And remember also that they are accounted for, provided by our U.S. Constitution, right? Don't forget that. So our U.S. Constitution provides for mainly the 3 branches of government. Our Bill of Rights provides for the citizens' rights that cannot be taken away by government, specific rights. That's the Bill of Rights. Remember, we read about the Bill of Rights, okay? So we have our Constitution, which provides for the 3 branches of government. And we also have... You're right, it is bright out here. It is actually bright, and I want to put on some sunglasses. I do. You're right, it is. I can see that I am doing more squinting than I thought that I was doing. Thank you. Thank you for that little tidbit of information. I'm going to try and work on that. But when you're outside, it's nice. I hope I'm not squinting inside. That wouldn't be good. Okay, so Constitution provides for the 3 branches of government. We talked about that, right? So I wanted to sort of reference what our title here is about. We're continuing on here with Abraham Lincoln because I didn't bring up the title. But I want us to understand, and I put this out on LinkedIn, I want us to understand what the president's duty is relative to all of these things that we've been discussing, like the Kansas-Nebraska Act, like the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and the Missouri Compromise of 1850, right? Like the Fugitive Slave Act, like the Dred Scott decision. What's going on with all this? How is all of this happening, right? How are we getting this passed and this decision made and that decision made? They all have to do with our 3 branches of government, okay? What was I just going to get from my purse? It was something I was going to get from my purse. I'm debating on getting those sunglasses. I do squint a lot. I've been told that. But that is in part because my eyes were burned from the sun when I was little. And now they're extra sensitive. Flashback to my conversation with two wonderful young ladies yesterday. Thank you for breakfast or lunch, brunch, whatever it was that we had. I don't know. It was delish. I'll say it. Anna's house. It was delish. Okay. So that's why I stopped there. I also said that I was going to talk to you about Stephen A. Douglas. I did put a slide together. I don't think it's complete, but I do have a slide that's put together, and it's pretty complete. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of these things that are going on. Dred Scott, Kansas-Nebraska, Missouri Compromise. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I also want to give you a heads up about something that I didn't put together, although I have all this, like 3 other slideshows that I haven't even started yet, showing you. And that is this. I'm going to take a look at the battles. I'm going to take a look at the battles of the Civil War. And I debated back and forth if I want to take a look at the battles or not, but the Battle of Gettysburg ends up being so important. And what I really did want to know is, I really did want to know whether or not the South was winning. Was the South really winning until the very end? Because that's kind of what it looked like, right? It kind of, if you look back at everything that I have been reading, I don't know if they were positioning themselves to look like they were winning when they weren't winning, or if they really were winning. And I think the only way to tell that is to look at the individual battles. So that's number one in the civil. What the future is bringing is taking a look at the battles of the Civil War. But the other reason why I wanted to take a look at the battles of the Civil War is because as I was looking for things, I came across from iCivics a couple historical monuments, only 2. And so I was like, well, let's take a look at these historical monuments. Because they were actually interesting. The 2 pictures that they had were actually interesting, not actually, but they were interesting, right? Of those historical monuments. I keep seeing myself squint now. This is what you did to me. Which is okay. But I'm realizing how sensitive my eyes really are, or can be, right? Under certain circumstances, I guess. So, I know. So, the historical monuments, right? And then I noticed that some of them were actually so I went on Google and I looked at the images to see where I might be able to find some, and it wasn't the easiest task while I was putting together 2 or 3 other PowerPoints for you, right? But what I noticed was this, that some of them were very dramatically beautiful. Some of them were dramatically beautiful. And it made me think about what people thought about the war. Because there was so much slavery going on and so much debate about it. And I've got some stats on the slavery, which I also got from iCivics, which is they're extraordinary stats about the percentage of people in the state that were enslaved. Sometimes over 50% of individuals in that state were enslaved. That's just extraordinary. When you think about how many people were speaking out against it and risking their lives to speak out against it, as we know we heard about from John Brown's raid. We're going to talk about that, some of these events that led up to the Civil War as we continue to go on. But the historical monument, so I'm seeing this real drama in the monument, in some of these monuments. And so there it goes to show you about reading between the lines. I'm looking at the cells on that leaf over there. It goes to show you about reading between the lines that the people weren't happy with that Trail of Tears. And we named our states, the majority of states, after American Indian tribes, so you will never forget, right? We have some of these historical monuments, not to pay homage, although some of them are, right? Not to necessarily pay homage, as much as maybe some of them are a dramatic statement about the times that you would understand if you read between the lines, right, for these events, and read between the lines when you look at these, again, at these historical statues. So that's upcoming as well. I had a fear because as a university professor, I have to stay on track, right? So I'm cramming information in and lecturing on it, while your responsibility is to have read that 60-page chapter while I lecture. Well, not our environment here, is it? So I don't want to rush this information for you. I really do want to slow it down, right? I think that restating the three branches, talking and restating about the three branches, I think that is important that we keep remembering and remembering, right? And recalling that information. Okay. See, because the brightness is right there. It's right there coming in. You can get me to be self-conscious, but it's only from the people that I care about. And I care about that person for reasons unknown. So again, Lincoln had to take a position that was middle road for all Americans, right? You were talking about money. You were talking about a lot of money, and a lot of money across a great region, the South, right? I don't think I put up that. Which I'm going to right now. I'm going to show you a map of slavery across the South. And this, too, is from, in fact, I've been talking about, so the stats are on here as well. So this is from iCivics as well. Okay. Watch this. You're going to like this for sure. And I'm like this. I'm not squinting. Oh, I know where I put it. Sometimes it's a challenge to find how you organize things, and but I've been doing it for years. So here is the PowerPoint from iCivics, and I'm surprised that they didn't put their name on the slide, and I was going to, and I didn't, and the link for them. So I'll be getting that for you guys. here is, you can see what was in question for the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was, what were we going to do with Missouri, is basically what it was. So what were we going to do with, here I think we've got, I might have the whole thing right here. Oh, there we go. What were we going to do with Missouri? Missouri was becoming a state. Was it going to be a free state or a slave state? So as you probably remember, in the Missouri Compromise, we were deciding what to do, and that's when they said slave state, free state, slave state, free state. We need to be keeping these equal. And they were very successful at doing that. So here we've got slave and free states before 1820, so unequal numbers. And then we wanted to add Missouri. We could not add, and Missouri wanted to be a slave state. We couldn't add Missouri as a slave state, according to the Missouri Compromise, without also adding a free state. If you take a look at the way that the states were organized when the United States was settled, what you see here look by where it says Mass. See where it says MASS period there, Mass, for Massachusetts. You can see the yellow is Massachusetts, and if you look south of that, you'll see another Mass, MASS, which is also yellow there as well, right? Both of those were representing the state of Massachusetts, but as you know, that's not where Massachusetts is. I'm just thinking. And where that MASS period is up at the top, that's Maine. That's Maine. So what did the Missouri Compromise do? The Missouri Compromise said if you add Missouri as a slave state, you need to add a free state, and the free state they added was Maine. It looked different, right? Now, here on this map, it says Maine, nice and clean. But in 1820, it wasn't Maine. It was Massachusetts, and it said disputed area with Britain. So what did they do? They made a free state, Maine. And isn't that amazing? I think that's amazing to see this, how iCivics did this for us. So that I think it's amazing because we can understand it, right? So then they also said that they also drew the 36-degree, 30 parallel line, whatever, which is, I don't know why I see the the latitude line, but not the longitude line. See that area that has got the dotted blue lines there? A latitude line on the map goes horizontally, like the horizon. Longitude goes vertical, up and down. So what they did was they basically defined the line that north of the line was going to be free states and south of the line was going to be slave states. But that didn't make any sense, right? It didn't even make any sense. Look at that map. How could that work out? We've got Kentucky and Virginia. No, it looks like north of the line, unless the line does a diagonal, which maybe it does. But remember, Buchanan said Missouri Compromise. They decided the Supreme Court decided when Buchanan was president that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional, that states needed to decide themselves. You can't just draw a line and say free to the north, slave to the south. So it makes sense that it was unconstitutional. But then the Kansas-Nebraska Act said that anybody could decide. Any state could decide whether or not they wanted to be free or not free. Well, then all of a sudden, it was the people who made the decisions were going to make that state free or not free. And we were having state after state wanting to come in as a slave state. And so all of those states became slave states after the Kansas-Nebraska Act that wiped out the Missouri Compromise. How is all of this happening? Where is the president deciding all of this stuff? Clearly, it isn't the president deciding all of this stuff. So how is it getting decided? That's what we were talking about in our title about making laws. And I've got a little video about how I learned how to do it. And do you want to know what? I'm going to show it to you right now. We're going to just jive back and forth, whatever you want to call it, jump back and forth, whatever you call it. I don't know what the word is I'm thinking of. With this book as well, and Lincoln. But I wanted to show you some of the stuff I've been working on really, really hard. And not make staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning a waste, because I could have done it, tonight, since I didn't show it today. Right? I got to show you the stuff. This was the last thing I put together. So this was the last thing I put together at 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, iCivics, for eventually letting me get some sleep. Okay. So, look at this. These are also the stats from iCivics. So there I've got the map there of the free states and the slave states. Now remember, look all the way over to the left, to the west. If you look to the west, you can see California is listed as a free state. But do you remember California laws that said basically any black man in this state is likely a slave and you can have them, and it's retroactive. You can come in here and call any black man a slave. You could say he was a slave from 10 years ago. It's all retroactive. So they had the strictest laws regarding slavery, right? And they were a free state. So you really, really have to learn to be a critical thinker. You really, really have to learn to read between the lines. Okay. Now, here's where I got those percentages. So you can do some math on the populations there. You could do some math on the populations. You could take that percentage and multiply it by the population. So the way that you would do that basically is you would do 0.51 times 771,623, for example. That would give you the percentage of slaves. That'd give you the percentage of slaves, right? And then you can get the percentage of free by subtracting the percentage of slaves from the total population and get the number of free people. So you could see in Alabama, they had more slaves than free people. You can see in Arkansas, about one quarter of the population is are slaves. Delaware only 3%. And in my mind, I was like, I wonder if those were the Bidens. Because one of the things we really are learning is we are learning that there is nepotism in politics, which is what we knew. But it's interesting that we don't see or hear the same familiar names that we did from the beginning when they've got children and grandchildren who have likely been in politics, except for those people that they eliminated. And I don't mean to be make light of that at all. I was going to say, except for maybe Pierce, but that would make, I don't want to make light of it because really people were being eliminated. So I wonder, Delaware, I wonder if any of those were the Bidens. DC, 7%. See over there, all to the right, almost all the way to the right there in the white area, as if it's in the Atlantic Ocean, is a dollar sign. You see a dollar sign there, and the dollar sign has a no money, like, so a X, there's a cross out for the dollar sign. That means that you could no longer slave trade in our capital, right? And that was actually brought about and signed by brought about by Stephen Douglas to Congress. So you could no longer, it was bad, it was a bad look for our capital to be trading, buying and selling human beings right there in our capital. So they're like, yeah, we can't do that in the capital, so hush hush, we'll do it other places, but hush hush at the capital, right? 27% in Florida, that's about 1/4 of Florida. Georgia, 55%, so over 1/2 in Georgia were slaves, and you have a population of almost 100,000. So about 450,000 slaves, 450,000, 500,000 slaves in Georgia. Likely about 500,000 slaves in Georgia. Kentucky, about 1/4 of their population, slaves. Louisiana, almost half. Maryland, 15%. Mississippi, almost 60% of their population was enslaved in Mississippi. And you begin to see then about and think about the culture, right? You begin to think about the culture in each one of those states and why they might be more interested in slavery and why they also may have long-term racism. Or not. Missouri, 14%. North Carolina, 1/3, 33%. While South Carolina, that seceded, the first to secede from the nation after Abraham Lincoln became president, almost 60% in South Carolina were enslaved. Tennessee, about 1/4. Texas, about 1/4. Virginia, about 1/3 of their population was enslaved. So some really, really good information, right? I thank you so much, iCivics, for giving me that free information. You kept me up until after 3 o'clock, just bombarding me with great information. I am so pleased. Okay, so I got through that. Let's take a look at... Yeah, I gave you a good heads up on all that. When we get to the PowerPoint for this lesson, it will be a reminder, but I just verbally gave you a heads up on the 3 branches of government. I told you on Thursday what some of the, like, judicial branch was Dred Scott, right? Well, Kansas-Nebraska Act would have been a law, like legislating. Who doesn't love men speaking foreign languages? Okay. Let me take a look at what I got going on here. Oh, yeah, no data, so it's going to end. Yep. Come on. Lucy, sit, please. Sit. Or you're going to have to go in the house. Come on, damn it. Okay, so I had to shut everything down because I got kicked out, and that I see I only had 25 minutes recorded, and I don't know why I only had 25 minutes recorded since I had been on when I got kicked out for 45 minutes. So that is distressing for sure in my Bookless Classroom. I'm not quite sure if it was just because it's all chopped up, but even still, that means that you're missing some of the audio. So I have to go back and look at that. I'm very, very disappointed, because I liked what I had to say, but there's going to be a lot of this that's going to be repeated, but it doesn't matter. The idea here is that you really want to try and generate some thought about what we're talking about so that it becomes second nature. What are the three branches of government? I didn't tell you in the last video before we got interrupted. I didn't tell you what those three branches of government are. I told you you need to know them, right? We talked about them before. When we get back to the PowerPoint, I will remind you. But in that first clip, in part one of this, what I did talk about was where they came from, right? Where they came from. Where did those branches of government actually come from? All right, so, it's getting a little warm here in Michigan. But that's okay. I like it a little bit warm. So I want to go back to... since we had a little break there, let's just go back to something that's slightly more organized, which is, than me, which is this book. So, we were talking more about Lincoln. In 1856, Lincoln joined the new anti-slavery Republican Party, and in 1858 became its nominee to challenge Douglas, Stephen Douglas, which we've talked about, for the Senate. The two began a series of debates which were to make Lincoln a national figure. And it's interesting that he could win the election. Well, they'll tell you. Lincoln challenged Douglas on his accommodations to slavery, saying, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." Though Lincoln lost the election, he had shown himself the most dynamic and eloquent Republican leader in the country. So he lost the election for Senate leader, is what he lost the election for, all right? If you didn't catch that. That reputation bore fruit in 1860 when he gained the Republican nomination for president and, facing a split Democratic Party, won the election. Hearing the news of the advent of this supposed anti-Southern president, 7 states of the lower South seceded from the Union, and the catastrophe dreaded from the founding of the nation arrived at last. So, seceded, right there, seceded, they left the nation. They left the nation, right? Lincoln came to Washington an unknown, a man with only 2 unsuccessful years of experience in national politics. He had been elected on the strength of his anti-slavery position, his eloquence, and such irrelevancies as being dubbed Honest Abe and the Illinois rail splitter. Lincoln later observed that he couldn't remember having split rails more than a day in his life. So you see how they end up getting these reputations, but how to know the real person, you need to read between the lines, right? Know a little history and do a little reading between the lines. In manner and appearance, he was not immediately prepossessing. Despite the brilliance of his rhetoric, his voice was high and flat, his frame gaunt and awkward, and his clothes ill-fitting. Let's take a look at these pictures. Here to the left right here. So this picture right here. Lincoln's law office in Springfield, Illinois in 1858 was above the shop and at the end of the block. Wow. It doesn't say Lincoln. Maybe it's at the other end. I doubt it, because why would they have that picture? Move it this way. That's pretty cool. You know, I'm getting on late for critical thinking, right? So I could run this a little bit longer. On the right here, the 5th debate between Lincoln and Douglas was held at Galesburg, Illinois on October 7th, 1858. So here, Knox College for Lincoln. Aren't those extraordinary pictures? I just love them. Below is Honest Abe taking them on the half shell. This campaign cartoon of 1860 plays on Lincoln's nicknames, Honest Abe and the Rail Splitter, and on Lincoln and the Republicans taking advantage of the split in the Democratic Party. So here we've got, so political, he's sitting at the Oyster House. Well, you could look at it. I'm a goner, sucker. That's Douglas right there. Alas, that ever I should love to be swallowed by a rail splitter. I'm not sure if that's Douglas as well or the other opponent. These fellows have planted so long in Washington that they are as fat as butter. I hardly know which to swallow first. These were the cartoons, the sarcastic cartoons that they had in the newspaper. Did you hear that? So that was his other opponent, but I don't remember who his other opponent was, and they didn't tell us in here. I'm sure I have it in one of these books right here, but I'll get to that later. But that was interesting, right? I don't know which one. They're as fat as butter. They've been in politics for so long, they're as fat as butter. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Oh, and then here we've got the overlay, which says, or the overleaf, President Lincoln writing the Proclamation of Freedom, the Emancipation Proclamation. So here he is writing it. Look at that. Look at that. Awesome picture. Although there is no acknowledgement, there's no reference. I don't know where that picture came from. John Bowman, did you draw that picture? Is that where that picture came from? I don't know. Without slavery, the war would not end, and without slavery, it would not be continued. The war would not be. Without slavery, the war would not be, and without slavery, it would not be continued. His face, though it had unmistakable nobility, looked as though it were hewn with an axe, and a scrubby new growth of whiskers did not help. Perhaps worst of all, he had the disconcerting habit of cracking jokes at the most inappropriate times, as if he were sitting around with his cronies in Illinois. A member of his cabinet dismissed him as the original guerrilla. Unsophisticated as he was, he seemed an unlikely man to save the Union. In his inaugural address, Lincoln made a succinct statement of his position. In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countryman, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. He would not attack the South or challenge slavery there, but he would at all costs preserve the Union. He ended the address with a typically Lincoln peroration. I'm not sure what that word is. Oration, peroration. I've got the accent wrong. Type of Lincoln-esque peroration. The mystic chords of memory will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as they surely will be by the better angels of our nature. Think about that. Think about what he's saying, because those are purty words and they're kind of purty hard to understand. The mystic chords of memory will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as they surely will be by the better angels of what? Of our nature. Love it. Love it. All right, we'll get to the pictures when we come back. Tomorrow, we'll get to some of these pictures, and I didn't get to the video that I want to get to, and I'm going to end with the video, and I likely will start with the video, because this is what I promised everybody, so we're getting to the video. I'm glad I have a green light here, though. I got out of that last one, shut everything down, and now I got a green light. Let's watch the video. Hopefully.
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee.
Aww. Let's shut it down and see if it will do it again. I mean, I have a green signal. There's no reason.
But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live now. I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be alone. How I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We'll talk about that video when we get back here tomorrow. That's an awesome video. That's where I learned what Congress does in their legislation with making laws. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me here in the Bookless Classroom. I'm going to be a little late, of course, getting on for my critical thinking, so maybe I'll be here at 10:45 or a little bit later. Hopefully I don't have any technology problems. That's what happened the last time. I couldn't get on, and I skipped the critical thinking classroom. And we went on Saturday. We went on Saturday because I had such bad reception. But now I shut everything down, and it's good reception. I should have done that before I got on. Then those other videos would have been a little better. Dr. Annette Feravich, I'm the teacher. This is the classroom. Thanks for joining me.